Did you know that seasoned federal interrogators can often spot deception in under 3 seconds? They aren't mind readers. They're not using magic. They're using a simple, almost invisible body language trick that 99% of people will never notice. It's a tell so deeply embedded in our biology that we do it without thinking, broadcasting our internal state to anyone who knows how to look. I'm going to show you what it is, and by the time we're done here, you'll have a skill that most people will go their entire lives without ever acquiring. But first, a challenge. In the next few moments, you're going to see a few scenarios play out. A first date, a high-stakes business negotiation, a teenager being questioned by his parents. In each one, someone is hiding something. Can you spot the signal before I reveal it? Watch very, very closely. Let me tell you about a man named Marcus Thorne, a wealth manager who handled the fortunes of some very powerful people. On paper, he was flawless. His audits were clean, his clients were happy, and his demeanor was pure confidence. He'd sit across from me in a $1,000 suit, cool as ice, answering every question with a perfectly rehearsed answer. For weeks, we got nothing. He was a fortress. But fortresses, no matter how strong, always have a weak point. His was a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture. Whenever I'd ask about a specific set of offshore accounts, his right hand would lift, just for a second, and his fingers would brush against the side of his neck, right over the carotid artery. It was a blink-and-you-miss-it movement. To my younger colleagues, it was just a random tick. To me, it was a flare in the darkness. It was the crack in the fortress wall. That tiny gesture told me everything his words were trying to hide: stress, fear, and deception. That's where we focused our pressure, and that's how the entire 7-figure embezzlement scheme unraveled. This isn't just for catching criminals. This is about understanding the hidden conversation that's happening all around you, every single day. The human body cannot lie. The mouth can, but the body keeps a perfect score. When you feel that knot in your stomach during a tense conversation, that's your body talking to you. When you see someone's posture change the moment you ask a difficult question, that's their body talking to you. The neck touch is one of the loudest, clearest signals it sends. It's a fundamental response to stress, programmed into our limbic system, the ancient, emotional part of our brain that reacts long before our conscious mind can build a lie. So, have you ever caught yourself doing it? That unconscious gesture when a conversation gets a little too real, a little too close to home? Think about it. When you're put on the spot, where do your hands go? Now, you might see a lot of content out there from self-proclaimed body language experts. I'm not one of them. My name is Arthur Hayes. I spent over 30 years as a private detective and interrogation consultant. I didn't learn what I know from a textbook. I learned it in small, windowless rooms, sitting across from people whose freedom depended on their ability to deceive me. I've worked with federal and local law enforcement, and I can tell you that the techniques taught to elite FBI profilers like the legendary Joe Navarro aren't out about flashy tricks. They're about a deep, fundamental understanding of human behavior under pressure. What I'm breaking down for you today is a core principle from that world, something that has been proven effective in well over 10,000 interrogations. This isn't about turning you into a human lie detector to win arguments or call out your friends. That's a fool's errand. This is about giving you an edge, a tool to navigate the complexities of human interaction with more clarity. Imagine the advantage you would have if you could sense the hidden tension in a business deal before you sign on the dotted line. Imagine the confidence you could gain on a first date if you could tell the difference between genuine interest and polite pretense. This skill is about seeing the emotional truth behind the social mask. It's subtle, and that's precisely why it's so powerful. Even trained professionals can miss it if they're not paying attention because they're too focused on the words being said. But the real story, the true story, is almost always told from the neck up, and often without a single word. Let me tell you about a young detective I mentored years ago. Call him Peterson. He was smart, ambitious, and he'd read all the books. He came to me after a 5-hour interrogation with a fraud suspect, completely exasperated. The guy's a rock, Peterson said. He didn't sweat, he didn't fidget, he looked me right in the eye. I asked Peterson to describe the suspect's posture. Sat up straight, hands folded on the table. I asked, "For the whole 5 hours?" Peterson paused. "Well," he said, "a few times when I mentioned the wire transfers, he adjusted his tie knot. I told Peterson to go back in there and forget the transfers. I told him to ask about the suspect's wife, his golf game, the weather, anything to relax him. Then hit him with a question about the specific date of the first wire transfer and watch his hands." An hour later, Peterson came back with a signed confession. The suspect didn't even realize he was doing it, but every time that specific detail came up, his hand went straight to his tie, tightening it as if it were a noose. It was an unconscious attempt to create space, to breathe, when the truth was choking him. Peterson was looking for a Hollywood-style meltdown. The truth was, in a quiet, repetitive gesture he'd dismissed as meaningless. Have you ever made a similar mistake, focusing so much on someone else's words that you missed the screamingly obvious signs their body was sending? To understand why the neck touch is such a reliable indicator, you need to understand what happens to your body when you tell a lie. It's not a moral failure, it's a biological event. Your brain is a horribly inefficient liar. Telling the truth is easy, you just recall a memory. But constructing a lie requires immense cognitive load. Your brain has to invent a false narrative, maintain its consistency, suppress the truth, and monitor the other person's reaction all at the same time. This immense effort triggers your autonomic nervous system, the same system that controls your fight-or-flight response. It's a full-blown internal emergency. Think of it like this. Your body is a high-pressure plumbing system. When you're calm, the water flows smoothly. But when you lie, it's like cranking the pressure valve to its maximum. The system can't handle it. It starts to spring leaks. That sweat on your brow? That's a leak. The sudden quiver in your voice? That's a leak. The fidgeting hands, the bouncing leg, and of course the touch to the neck? All leaks. These are physiological responses to the stress hormone cortisol flooding your system. You can stop it with willpower any more than you can consciously stop your heart from beating faster when you are afraid. Your body is betraying your mind's intentions. So why the neck? Why not the elbow or the knee? The neck is a uniquely vulnerable and significant part of the human body. It houses the carotid artery, which supplies blood to the brain, and the vagus nerve, a critical component in managing stress responses. Psychologically, it's a zone of vulnerability. Think of how animals attack the neck of their prey. Subconsciously, we perceive it as a weak point. Therefore, when we feel threatened, exposed, or internally conflicted by deception, we instinctively move to protect or soothe this area. It's a self-pacifying gesture. It is the adult version of a child sucking their thumb, an unconscious attempt to comfort ourselves in a moment of high anxiety. You'll also see a fascinating difference between how men and women typically exhibit this behavior. Men, often due to social conditioning or the presence of a shirt collar, tend to make a more overt gesture. They might grab the front or sides of their neck, pull at their collar as if it's suddenly too tight, or perform a full-on neck rub. It can look like they're genuinely uncomfortable. For women, the gesture is often much more delicate and subtle. It might be a light touch to the suprasternal notch, that little hollow at the base of the throat, often with just the fingertips. It can also manifest as playing with a necklace or smoothing the front of their blouse near the collarbone. It's the same principle, pacifying a vulnerable area, but the expression is different. Have you started noticing this pattern in people around you now that you know what to look for? The neck touch doesn't exist in a vacuum. It belongs to a whole family of behaviors that we in the business call pacifying gestures or self-soothing tells. Understanding this broader category is crucial because not everyone's stress leaks out through their neck. Thinking the neck touch is the only sign is like a hunter looking for deer tracks and ignoring bear tracks, broken branches, and fresh scat. You're missing most of the forest. A pacifying gesture is any repetitive, non-instrumental action a person performs to calm themselves down when under psychological stress. The key is that the action serves no practical purpose. Its only function is to discharge nervous energy and provide a moment of physical comfort. I once investigated a case of industrial espionage at a tech firm. The main suspect was the lead engineer, a brilliant but socially awkward man named David. I sat with him for hours. I questioned him about security protocols, access logs, everything. He was a statue, no neck touching, no collar pulling, nothing. My colleagues were ready to clear him, but I noticed something else. Throughout the entire interview, whenever I brought up the competitor who had miraculously developed a similar technology, David would place his left hand on his right bicep and slowly, methodically, stroke his arm from the shoulder to the elbow. It was a smooth, rhythmic gesture. He did it maybe 5 or 6 times over 3 hours, but only when that competitor's name was mentioned. This was his version of the neck touch. It was his pacifying behavior. For him, the vulnerable area wasn't his throat. It was the feeling of being held, of being secure. That arm stroking was a subconscious act of self-reassurance. It was his tell. We used that piece of information to dig into his communication with that specific competitor, and we found the trail of deleted emails that broke the case. If we had only been looking for the classic neck touch, we would have missed it entirely. David would have walked away clean. So what other forms do these gestures take? They are legion. You might see someone rubbing the top of their leg under the table. You might see them repeatedly smoothing their hair even when it's not out of place. Adjusting a tie, stroking a beard, fiddling with a cufflink, playing with a pen, gently rocking in their chair. These can all be pacifying behaviors. The key is to identify the pattern and the trigger. Does the behavior appear randomly, or does it manifest specifically in response to a certain topic or question? When you see the gesture, you know you've touched a nerve. You've hit something that's causing internal friction. Have you ever considered what your own go-to pacifying gesture is? When the pressure is on, what do you do with your hands, your feet, your body, without even realizing it? Identifying it in yourself is the first step to being able to spot it in others. Now let's get into the granular details. Knowing the principle is one thing, applying it effectively is another. It requires a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Let's break down some examples, and I want you to analyze them with me. Imagine a young man in a job interview. The hiring manager asks him, "This resume is impressive, but it says you left your last job after only 6 months. Can you tell me why?" As he begins to answer, "It just wasn't the right cultural fit." His hand comes up, and he briefly rubs the back of his neck. Now, is he lying? Not necessarily. This is a perfect example of where context is king. A job interview is an inherently stressful situation. That question puts him on the defensive. The neck rub is more likely a signal of discomfort and anxiety rather than outright deception. He's probably embarrassed about the short tenure at his last job. Now, contrast that with another scenario. A wife asks her husband, "Did you remember to transfer the money for the mortgage payment today?" He looks up from his phone, smiles, and says, "Yep, all taken care of, honey." But for a split second, as the words leave his mouth, his fingers dart up and scratch the side of his neck. That is a much stronger indicator of deception. The question was simple, non-accusatory, and part of a routine conversation. There is no inherent stress in that moment, unless he is manufacturing it by telling a lie. The gesture is completely incongruous with the casual nature of his verbal response. That mismatch, that tell appearing where it shouldn't, is the red flag. The gesture, the timing, and the context all formed a cluster that pointed to a problem. This brings me to the 2 most important rules for avoiding misinterpretation. Look for clusters and mind the timing. A single gesture, an isolated neck touch, means almost nothing. It could be a random itch, a muscle cramp, anything. Don't be an amateur who calls liar at the first sign of a fidget. A professional looks for a cluster of tells happening together. Does the neck touch happen at the same time he breaks eye contact? Is it accompanied by a slight shuffle of his feet or a clearing of his throat? One leak can be patched, but 3 or 4 springing at once indicates a systemic failure. The timing is just as critical. The tell is most significant when it occurs within a second or two of a specific stimulus, usually a question. If you ask, "Were you at the office last night?" and he touches his neck immediately before or as he says, "No," that's a bright red flag. If he touches his neck 30 seconds later while talking about the weather, it's probably meaningless. So, let's try a quick test. I'm going to describe 2 clips. In clip A, a politician is asked about a rumored scandal, and as she denies it, she touches her necklace at the base of her throat. In clip B, a student giving a presentation in front of a class touches his neck while explaining a complex slide. Which of these is more likely to be a sign of deception? Go ahead and think about it. The answer is clip A. The student is under the normal stress of public speaking. The politician is responding to a direct accusation, and the gesture is likely tied to the anxiety of a potential lie. Did you get it right? Let's move this out of the interrogation room and into your daily life where the stakes can be just as high. The principles of spotting these tells are universal, whether you're negotiating a multi-million-dollar contract or simply trying to figure out if your teenager actually finished their homework. It's about reading the emotional subtext of the conversation. Think about the world of dating. You're sitting across from someone on a first date. The conversation is flowing, everything seems great. You ask a seemingly innocent question like, "So, your profile said you're looking for something serious. Are you over your last relationship?" They smile and say, "Oh, absolutely. That's ancient history." But as they say it, you notice her fingers gently trace her collarbone, or you see his hand go up to adjust a perfectly straight shirt collar. What is that telling you? It's not necessarily that they're lying about being over their ex, but it does tell you that the topic is a source of significant discomfort. It's a nerve. That tiny gesture provides a wealth of information. It tells you to proceed with caution on that topic, that there are unresolved emotions just beneath the surface. It's a roadmap to their emotional interior. Now let's take it to the boardroom. You're in a tense negotiation to buy a piece of equipment for your company. The seller has given you their final offer. It's high, but they're insisting it's their absolute bottom line. You look the seller in the eye and ask, "Is there truly no flexibility in this price?" They reply, "I'm sorry, this is the best we can do." But as they say it, they give their neck a quick rub. That's your signal. That gesture is a leak of their uncertainty and stress. It tells you they are uncomfortable with the position they are holding, which likely means it's not their true final offer. They are posturing. That's the moment you hold your ground, stay silent, and wait. More often than not, they will be the first to speak again, often with a slightly revised offer. That single nonverbal cue just saved you thousands of dollars. It even works at home. You suspect your son broke the expensive vase in the living room. You ask him, "Do you know what happened to the vase on the mantelpiece?" He looks you straight in the eye and says, "No, I haven't been near it all day." A perfect delivery. Except, just as he finishes the sentence, his hand comes up and pulls on his t-shirt collar. You have your answer. The cognitive load of fabricating the lie and suppressing the truth about his guilt created a spike in stress that had to leak out somewhere. He's not a hardened criminal, he's a kid whose body is betraying him. Now, how you use that information is a matter of parenting, but you have the information. Have you ever looked back on a conversation that felt off, and in hindsight realized you saw one of these gestures but didn't know how to interpret it? I've given you some powerful tools today: the neck touch, the concept of pacifying behaviors, the importance of timing and clusters, but now I have to give you the single most important rule, the one that governs everything else. Without this, everything I've taught you is not only useless, it's dangerous. And that rule is this: you must understand the person's baseline. A baseline is a person's normal pattern of behavior when they are in a relaxed, non-threatening environment. It's their default setting. It's how they fidget, speak, and hold themselves when they have no reason to be stressed or deceptive. If you don't know what's normal for someone, you have absolutely no way of accurately spotting what's abnormal. Let me give you a stark example. Early in my career, I was brought in to consult on an arson case. The primary suspect was the business owner, a man named Henderson. My colleagues were convinced he was guilty. He's a wreck, they told me. Can't sit still, constantly rubbing his neck, fidgets with his watch. He's lying through his teeth. I went into the room and they were right. He was a mess of nervous energy. But I didn't start by asking about the fire. I started by asking about his family. I asked about the town he grew up in. I asked about his first car. And you know what I saw? He was just as fidgety and just as much of a neck rubber when talking about his daughter's piano recital as he was when talking about the fire. This was his baseline. He was just a high-strung, naturally anxious person. His tells weren't tells at all, they were just his personality. The stress of being accused of a crime had amplified his normal behavior, but it wasn't a signal of deception. We later found out the fire was started by a faulty electrical panel. My colleagues almost railroaded an innocent man because they mistook his anxious nature for a guilty conscience. They failed to establish a baseline. So, how do you do this in real life? It's simple. You engage in small talk. Before you get to the important question in a business meeting, you ask about their weekend or comment on the weather. When you meet a date, you talk about the restaurant or something light and easy for the first few minutes. You are not just being polite, you are gathering crucial data. You are observing. How much eye contact do they normally make? How much do they gesture with their hands? Are they naturally still or naturally fidgety? You are building a mental snapshot of their normal. Then, and only then, when you pivot to a more serious or sensitive topic, can you spot the deviations. When their eye contact suddenly breaks, when a new, repetitive gesture like a neck touch appears out of nowhere, that's when the signal has meaning. The tell is not the behavior itself, the tell is the change from the baseline behavior. So I ask you, in your most important interactions, are you taking the time to observe what's normal before you start looking for what's not? We need to have a serious talk about the ethics of this. The knowledge I've shared with you is a powerful tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. It can be a scalpel for uncovering truth, or it can be a hammer for bludgeoning the innocent. Your biggest enemy in applying this knowledge is not the liar you are trying to catch, it's your own mind. Specifically, a cognitive trap called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, and recall information in a way that confirms your pre-existing beliefs. If you go into a conversation believing someone is lying to you, you will unconsciously interpret every neck scratch, every throat clear, and every broken gaze as proof of their guilt. You will see what you want to see. This is the fast track to paranoia, false accusations, and destroyed relationships. I've seen it happen. I knew a detective who was so convinced a certain suspect was guilty in a robbery case that he interpreted the man's nervous stutter, a lifelong affliction, as a deceptive hesitation. He saw the man's habit of rubbing his hands together, a sign of his anxiety, as a signal of a guilty mind. The detective's certainty blinded him to the actual evidence, which eventually exonerated the suspect. He wasn't a bad detective. He was a human being who fell into a common psychological trap. He was hunting for lies so hard that he manufactured them out of thin air. Remember, stress can mean many things. The man in the job interview is stressed. The student giving a presentation is stressed. The innocent person being wrongly accused of a crime is profoundly stressed. Do not ever accuse someone based on a single sign. This is about gathering information, not casting judgment. So let's bring it all home. We've covered the FBI's 3-second secret. The neck touch, a powerful indicator of stress and deception rooted in our biology. We've learned that it's part of a larger family of pacifying behaviors the body uses to soothe itself under pressure. We know that to interpret it correctly, we must look for clusters of tells and pay excruciatingly close attention to the timing. And most importantly, We know that none of it means anything without first establishing a person's baseline behavior. Here is your final challenge, your homework. For the next week, I want you to become a quiet observer. In a coffee shop, at work, with your family. Don't look for lies. Just watch people. Establish a baseline. Notice their normal tics, gestures, and postures. Then, when the conversation shifts, just observe any changes. Try to spot a neck touch or another pacifying gesture in a real, live conversation. Don't act on it. Don't say anything. Just file it away. Share your story in the comments below. What did you see, and what do you think it meant? The more you practice passive observation, the more attuned you will become to the secret unspoken language of human behavior. Next week, we're going to dive even deeper. We'll be discussing the one place the body absolutely cannot hide a lie: the eyes. We'll break down the FBI's techniques for reading eye movement and pupil dilation. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. Master this, and you'll be able to read the room like never before.